We are so excited to come back with Life on Purpose Live. We're going to talk today about one of my most favorite topics, and that is communication. And specifically, loud is not a language. You would never know that in today's world. So, welcome, Brenda Harkins. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here.
So Brenda's coming from Texas, and so we got the Southern thing going on here. So we might throw a y'all in there from time to time, but
Quite a few.
we're we're going to talk about. She's a coach. She's a corporate trainer. She does a lot of work within the Christian community. She's a minister. She's an author, a speaker. So she's got a lot of hats that she wears, but all around the central theme of communication, specifically loud is not a language. So tell me about the title, because it's pretty inviting.
It is inviting. It invited me in, I tell you what. So back up to 2016, my husband and I were at a social dinner with some business associates that we knew casually. And this was about 2 weeks before the Clinton-Trump presidential election. And somebody at the table said, "So what do you all think about our first woman president?" And there were some really strong Trump and really strong Clinton supporters at the same table. And it got loud. And it got louder in attitude than it did in volume. And there were accusations and assumptions and things that people were saying that, it's kind of, it was almost like I was watching from above. It was almost like I was just watching the table, but I wasn't at the table. And I was just looking back and forth thinking, these are like really successful, intelligent people here. And they don't have any idea that what they're saying and how they're saying it is pushing people away from the very thing they want to draw people to. They're wanting them to understand their perspective, but their manner of communication is just pushing people away and causing them to dig their heels in further in the position they're already in. And so, as I was sitting there, I'm thinking, I don't even know what to do, what to say. And this loud is not a language just fell into my brain. It was like I didn't think it up, it fell into my brain. And I thought, loud is not a language. What is that about? And then I'm watching exactly what it was about, and just seeing that loud pushes people away. It doesn't invite them in. It speaks opinions. It doesn't invite understanding. And so for the last 7 years, I have been processing that and adding some of that to what, well, obviously what I've written, but also just to my coaching, just a process that has unfolded with how to communicate in a way that helps to increase the quality that we have in our relationships and the impact of the influence we all want to have, but it does it through building bridges of trust.
So let's talk about that topic of communication, because as a coach, one of the things that I ask people, almost from the get-go, is, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, where do you think you fall on I'm a great communicator or I'm awful at communicating? And I've never yet had anyone say they're a 10 or anywhere near close. Usually people feel inadequate when it comes to communication. So why do people pull back and not communicate more than we do? What's holding up that clarity? And you talk about clarity a lot. What's holding that up? Because I think people shy away from talking about what needs to be talked about.
I agree. Either that or they attack it. And I think fear is the answer to that. Yeah. I think that we fear not being right. We fear not being in control, and we fear not looking good. And so when something triggers something that we're passionate about and we want to communicate it, and there's an indication that it might not be received, there's one of two reactions that I see. You probably do too. People either like go for the throat or they just shut down. Yeah. And there were people at the table that night that just got up and left.
Yeah. And I think that's what happens is, we think well, I'm just going to sweep this under the rug and hope this goes away. And, you know, not long ago, I was talking to someone very dear and close to me. And she said, I just don't want to have to deal with that. And it was someone in her life that was very close to her. And I said, but see, there's the thing, you have to. You know, this has been going on for years. But what you have to do is you have to pull back and you have to have a strategy to deal with that. So you make a list of the things that you want to talk about and how you want to talk about it. And, you know, write the word calm, slow, you know, gratitude, you know, kind all over the piece of paper, but enter into that conversation, because what happens when you delay those necessary conversations?
Yeah, it gets worse. It builds up inside of us, right? And I know that the skills that we need to communicate are super important, but one of the things that has just really been highlighted to me in this whole loud is not a language process is the need for us to get ready for the conversation internally. And
Mm,
and one of the things that I use for that is that invitation to pull up a chair. You know, when we say to somebody, pull up a chair, we're inviting them into a conversation. And so
mhm,
there's this acronym for chair that I use as a self checklist. And it's each of the letters stands for something that we need to just pause and check ourselves for. And so courage is the C, and that's just to be sure that we are clear in our minds about what's more important than the fear that we're feeling. That's really what
mhm,
courage is. And so,
mhm,
what is the outcome we want? And is that more important? And yes, then we determine we're going to step into that. The H is for humility, because so many times we want to step in with our thoughts and perspectives. And what I have seen, I think 100% of the time, what I've seen, I'm not saying it's always that way, but for me, it has been, is that when I step into a conversation prioritizing the other person's perspectives, when I ask and I want to hear what their thoughts and opinions and why and really understand, it has always been reciprocal that they're willing to, can I share with you my perspective on that? And
mhm,
when I'm genuine in listening to them, they can feel that. It builds some trust. I mean, I call
mhm,
them trust bridges. And so that's the H. Humility, authenticity, for us to be really real. I think a lot of times people think that we have to agree with somebody, or they don't want to appear to agree with somebody because they're listening to a different, I mean, it's just crazy what our brains do. But to realize that we can be authentic with who we are and still listen to somebody else. Understanding does not require agreement, you know?
mhm,
So to understand that, the I is for integrity. And I look at that as heart motives to what is my motive for wanting to have this conversation? Am I
mhm,
going into this conversation for the sole purpose of wanting to change that person's mind to think like me?
mhm.
And if I am, would I trust them if I knew that's what their motives were to me?
Mm, good
That's the
question.
integrity check right there. And
Mhm,
then respect is just to respect the person in front of us. Not, you don't even have to respect their perspective. Just respect who they are and that they have a right to have that perspective.
yeah.
But when we get all of that clear with who we're looking at right in front of us, then we're ready to start utilizing whatever skills, whatever communication skills. But it's got to start with the heart.
So, how many conversations end up with people making assumptions based on lack of information? Because I believe that it's upon me to complete a conversation. You know, my husband and I may disagree about something, but if I stop just short, then I'm going to start assuming something's wrong. You know, the worst of his outcome or his response to me, when in truth I could have said, hey honey, did you really mean that like I took it? And then he'd be like, no, I didn't, let me explain. So I think we
Exactly.
jump, yeah. So how do we know when we're beginning to jump to conclusions and we're wrong about the conclusions we're reaching because we don't have facts?
I think you just hit it. We ask the
Mm,
questions, we clarify. This is what I think you're saying. This is what it sounds like to me. Am I right? That's
mhm,
not a hard thing to do. That's
Hmm.
not a hard thing to do, because how many times have we been in conversations with people where we start responding according to what we think they said, and they're like,
Hmm.
"Oh, no, 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 that's not at all what I meant." Or
Yeah.
vice versa. Somebody's saying something back to us and we're like, "Whoa, no, no, that's not at all where I was going." So
Yeah.
just ask the questions.
Yeah.
You gave the example of your husband. It's perfect.
Well, and the difficult conversations are part of life. They're part of work, they're part of family, they're part of, if you're married, they're part of kids, whether they're adult or small. Having difficult conversations are part of life. So how important is it to invest in communication skills to the degree that you learn how to have a better one as opposed to a less better one?
Right? I mean, if we want to be understood, then we have to invest in understanding others.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so I think each person has to determine that for themselves and understand that we all want to be heard. We just don't always want to hear what other people have to say. And to get to
True.
that place that we realize somebody else's perspective is not the enemy.
Hmm. Good point. Good point.
Somebody else's perspective is what they believe because of their very unique life circumstances and what they believed about those circumstances. I mean,
Mm.
that's what develops all of our perspectives. So it's not the perspective that's the enemy. And when we ask the questions and we understand where they're coming from, it opens us up sometimes to a whole new realm of relationship. That's why I think that this process, this loud is not a language process, helps us to truly increase the quality that we have, even in the good relationships we have.
Yeah.
And then to build relationships of trust with people like you shared about your friend that is very different.
Yeah. Hmm. Right. And it doesn't mean that I don't generally talk politics with people because I don't dig deep enough to have a factual conversation with someone about it. I ask my husband, tell me what's happening in the news today, and he'll tell me, but I don't enter into conversations where I don't have accurate information to be able to enter in with anything other than an opinion. So you know what I'm saying? So I think it behooves us, if we're going to talk topics, that we understand our topics. Is that true?
Yeah. Yeah, I do think that's true. And I also think that there's nothing wrong with saying in a conversation what you just said. I don't really feel comfortable talking about this simply because I just don't really know enough about it. All you're
Yeah,
going to
it's
get
just,
is an
yeah,
opinion that may or may not be accurate. And
yeah,
just be honest with people. Don't Isn't that refreshing?
yes,
To me, when people are just honest and refreshed, it's just refreshing to me because
yeah.
everybody's trying to be right on
Hmm.
everything.
So, as Christians, and I know the second book that you're coming out with is Loud is Not a Language for Christians.
Mhm.
What does that change? So, we're trying to reach the world for Christ. We're trying to change the world by sharing the Savior that we have encountered, and He has come into our life and He has forgiven us. How do we communicate that message that it's not, people are so offended by anything that people say? I mean, that is a conversation in and of itself. So what are you going to say in that book that would change what you might say to someone in a corporate setting?
Well, in a corporate setting, I'm just talking to people and I don't know what their beliefs are. If I'm
Right.
talking to people in a Christian setting, I assume that they're followers of Jesus. And so to utilize how did he reach the world?
Mm.
He discipled 12 guys for 3 years.
Mm.
You
Yeah.
know, he didn't try to fill stadiums and get people to pray a prayer. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm not saying there's a thing wrong with that.
Right.
But are we willing to invest in the relationships necessary? Because that's what Jesus did. He invested in relationships deeply with these guys. And I think that that's missing in our world. I think that
Hmm.
it's missing that we when he delved deep into relationship with them, he heard their stories. He knew where they came from. He
Mhm.
dismantled beliefs, and he helped to, helped them to see things. And I think
Mhm.
that too often we think it's our job to get somebody to change the way they think
Yeah.
and change the way they believe. And first of all, that is just way beyond my ability to do.
Right.
All I can do is share with somebody my experience and what following Jesus has meant to me, and then just to love them and hear their experiences and walk with them, whether they change their mind or not, to continue to love them, whether they accept what I'm saying or not. And I think a lot of times we cut off relationship
Yeah.
because somebody doesn't believe
Yeah.
what we did. So move on, next person. Maybe we can get somebody else to believe. And we
Yeah.
don't invest in relationships. And that's
Yeah.
important to Jesus, I believe.
It's so true. And there's another kind of communication, and you talk about becoming your own VIP. That's unspoken communication. That's body language. And what you talked about, that sitting at that table, some of it was tone of voice. So how
Mhm.
important is the communication and how we carry ourselves, how we present ourselves? Because people say to me, how did you get to be so confident? Well, I did things that required confidence because I had to. I couldn't just, you know what I mean? I couldn't wait till all of a sudden I woke up one day and I thought, wow, I just got
I
this.
feel confident.
That's right. It didn't ever happen. And so you do things that require confidence, and then I think carrying yourself in a way that you do love yourself so you can love others. Let's talk about that for a minute. How important is that? Because people can read what you're saying without ever having heard a word.
They can. Yeah, they can. So I think that stepping into those situations that require confidence, even when we don't feel confident, for one thing,
Hmm.
that helps to build that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But the VIP is to really know your voice, to begin to know your voice, which comes from the experiences that you have been through. Like each one of us, anybody listening knows that through an experience they've been through that was difficult, there were things that they learned that they take you up to the next level, right? And if
Hmm.
you stay at that level in your communication, and then you continue to step into those hard conversations and you rise up to the next level and the next level. And so when we realize that what we have lived through is what we have almost an authority to give out to others. It's like I've lived this. I understand this.
Yeah.
You can have this too.
Hmm.
Um, there's something about owning As a matter of fact, I wear a ring constantly that it right here it says own your journey, because owning your journey is a part of understanding what your voice is, what your purpose is.
Hmm. And
Mhm.
don't you think that adds to this crisis we have of, identity, the anxiety, depression? So much of that is fueled by not knowing who we are. And therefore, we're trying to find that in social media and what other people are doing. But what you're saying is find your own voice. So, how do you do that if you're trying to compete with everybody? I mean, how do you take a step
Yeah,
back and say, okay, who am
yeah,
I?
yeah. Um, Couple of things that I work with people on. One of them is what how I began to understand what my purpose was, and that was as a around 40 years old. I realized I didn't even know what my favorite color was. I had lost so much of myself giving out to others that I
Mm,
went through a process to where I went back as far as I could in my memory, and as young as I think I was around 5 years old when I started remembering things that stood out as wonderful. And I started writing down everything that felt great that I remembered. And then I looked for a thread that ran through
mm,
it all. And it's truly amazing. I've walked through it with so many people in that process. There is a thread that runs from before you had any idea what purpose even meant to where you are today, that has to do with how you're wired and why you were put here on this planet. And so looking back and seeing that helps to build a confidence with, oh, that's not just something I enjoy. That's something that's in me. That's something
Mm-hmm.
that put in me, that
Mm-hmm.
I've lived out in different ways all throughout my life. And that itself builds a confidence. But you were talking identity, and can I share something with you about that? That the other night I just woke up with this thought. And we hear people say a lot, I identify as fill in the blank. And a lot of that these days has to do with gender identity, right? But each one of us identifies as something. I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, I'm a American, I'm a Texan, it's not just that, even
Mm-hmm.
though we hear so much of right now. So when we think about the word identify and the word identity, what we identify as is not necessarily my identity. But even when you look at those two words, they're so similar. There's a T and an F that's different, and that's it. And even those two letters look the same. And
Mm-hmm.
I started looking at that and seeing that, wow, that's what deception looks like. Deception is so tricky. Just one letter difference can cause us to think what we identify as is our identity.
Wow, that's pretty
So,
profound.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it was for me. I'm still pondering that.
But what you said you did, and this is, and then I want to go into your book and that. So what you said though is that you invested in a process of writing down the things that you are. And I think we need to do the work of investing in who we are. And that's a lot of what I love doing for myself and for others, is getting to the core of who Beth is. Not wife Beth, not mom Beth, not grandmom Beth, not
Just
all those things, just plain old Beth. Beth was here way before all those other things came about. So who is Beth? Who is Brenda? And I think if you can't answer that question, then you have to go back to the drawing board, because I like to say, if you don't know who you are, you'll never know what to do.
right. If you don't know who you are, you start pulling from the different pieces of the people in front of you that you like, and trying to make that who you are. And
Yeah,
that doesn't work very well either.
it really doesn't. So your book, "Loud is Not a Language," is it's a book, and it's a training manual. It's about communication. People order that. What are they going to get out of it?
They're going to get a method of checking themselves first, like I just talked about with the chair method, goes through
Mm-hmm.
that, but it also goes through the applicable skills of what it looks like. We literally dismantle the word loud, LOUD, into a process that it is a simple process. It is not an easy process because it requires work from you
Mm-hmm.
to do
Mm-hmm.
that. But it's a way it's a very applicable method that is a framework of thinking that's a little different, to look at our relationships that we have with people in a way that allows there to be trust built, relationship built, influence made, and the effectiveness of our communication is to where people actually hear what we're saying because we're taking the time to actually understand what they're saying. So it's a breaking down of that process.
So if you want to have better relationships, if you want to communicate more effectively, if you want to learn to listen more actively, then it's in your book, "Loud is Not a Language," and that's available on your website as well as Amazon and most other places, right?
Barnes and Noble and all, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, I've enjoyed talking to you. We kind of speak the same language on a lot of things, so this is
Uh,
a fun topic to talk about. I think anytime we can improve our level of communication, we've vastly improved the level of our relationships from
Yeah.
God on down to the people that we work with and the people we pass by in the grocery store. So
Yes.
it's definitely worth doing the work. And I'm a big believer you got to do the work to get the work done.
That's right. I agree.
All right, Brenda, good talking to you. We'll come back and do this again. Thank you so much for joining me today. And anybody that wants to go get Loud Is Not a Language, and you can find her website and we'll have it listed in the comments.
Thank you, Beth. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.